Hi guys, welcome back. My name is Adrian Bablinski, and this is part 3 of the Learning of Basics in Unity tutorial series. Last time when we left off, we learned about the edit window, which was super exciting, and now we're going to jump into our game object window, which is going to be even more exciting. And I mean that, by the way. So I'm going to go and I'm going to open a new scene. So we're going to go File, of course, right? If you guys have been doing your studying, and then go to New Scene. And we're not going to save this scene. Or actually, no, it doesn't matter. And we're going to create a cube. Now, which of these which one of these windows would we open? Drop-down windows. We're going to go to Game Object. This is a 3D project, so we're going to go 3D Object, and we're going to go to Cube. Here, we can also we can edit the position by dragging these arrows, but we can also, I'm going to hit Control Z to undo, we can also use these inputs. So you see if I change this, it goes in the X position. Not relative to me though, it is relative to the object. So as you see, if you look right here, you see that this is actually the Z. So if I want to move it to the left, then I'd go -Z, right? So just keep that in mind. I use this if I'm, trying to be precise, if I'm moving multiple objects and I want everything, the spread to be the same, I kind of copy all these. And it's good for debugging purposes in code later on down the road. So here, what we're going to do is we're going to make this a floor. To do that, we can scale the cube. And you're like, well, how are we going to do that? Well, there's two ways. We can go to the scaling tool. So we can either hit R, or we can press this key right here. And we can scale it, right? But how long will we know how to make it? There's a couple of variables. And I don't like leaving things to chance, so I'm just going to type in the variables here. In the X, I'm going to hit 100. And in Z, I'm going to hit 100. And that will leave us with this beautiful plane. Except it's a cube. Now, why aren't we using a plane, right? Because if you go to Game Object, 3D, you will see that there is an option for plane. And the reason why is we can see the ground here, we can see it here, we can see a little depth, kind of gives it a nice effect. If I go Game Object, 3D, plane, and what do we learn about planes in geometry class? They have no depth. Remember that. So if I click on my plane, double click on it to center it, scroll in, I see the plane, and it's invisible here. And till it passes the horizon, so now it's 0, 0, so now I can't see it at all, and then I see the plane. And that is fine, but I like to not edit a scene where, if I'm editing, things disappear from my view. So I kind of like to visualize it in my editor, and I just prefer cubes. But you can go ahead and use a plane if you like. However, you can't then increase the height. You can't. This is impossible on a plane. If you don't believe me, I'm going to do it right here. So I'm going to go Game Object, 3D, plane, and you see nothing. You can invert it, but you cannot stretch it out. You can't make it into a cube. So I'm going to delete that. So now we have this beautiful cube. Now we can go into the more game objects. We can create a game object, create an empty, which an empty game object is basically a folder within the scene. So it generates nothing. Let me create an empty to show you. Right here, and there it is, right? Well, it looks like I'm just random, right? I can double click on it and it's blank space. Now if I put a cube in there, so I'm going to hold my cube, I'll drag and drop into a folder, and you can do that, even without the game object class. You can drag it onto the camera, but we're going to drag into this empty game object entitled game object. And now if I move this empty game object, okay, now it's selected everything. So if I move it, it will move with the game object. And the cool thing is, if I duplicate this cube, like this, right, and then maybe I rotate it, so I hit E to rotate, and I rotate it like this, I click on my folder, it selects the middle, it goes into the middle, and I'm able to move it like so. So it's pretty cool, right? It has that effect, and then I can uniformly turn it and stuff like that. So it's a pretty cool effect. It's a pretty cool tool to use. One thing, so let's say I have I can duplicate the empty, right? So then I'm going to go to my move tool by clicking the move tool button. You can also hit W for the move tool. I'm going to move it up like so. And then we have two, and you're like, well, what if one is father game object and one of them's mother game object? You know, how are we going to distinguish the two? Well, and let's remove this one. Let's make it tricky. So, you know, pretend there's a magician. He puts a blind over your face and then changes them up. Now, how do you know which one's what? You don't. So one way to keep things organized, you can click on this lovely object. It doesn't look clickable, but when you click on it, you can assign it a beautiful color. And I'm going to hit orange. And now, look at that. The title is highlighted, but now I know for sure that this is this object. I can name this differently. I can name this one differently. But all in all, I know in my head that there are two empty game objects and that this is one and this is the other. Now you cannot select the empty game object inside the scene view because, again, there is no geometry. So you have to select it like this. But now you know you can distinguish it by color, and that is a pretty cool thing to do if you have empty objects as spot points or waypoints. You might not want to generate something from code. You might just want to use a little color graphic right here, and then you can also hit other, and if you hit other, you can add your own graphics, so you can make a little check mark and whatnot. But that requires a little bit of code, or not code, a little bit of Photoshop knowledge and that lovely information. But other than that, that is this lovely section. Here we can also go into UI building, which if you follow a UI tutorial, you will go into a lot of UI, and anything that you create inside the game view is inside the game object tab. So if someone says, hey, create a button, right? You're here, right? So you're not gonna guess it's in the assets, because assets are just assets that you import into your project folder right here. You're gonna guess that it's in the game object, and reading from these descriptions, you're gonna, infer it's gonna be in the UI, and then you hit buttons, and like so, a button appears in the scene and in the game view. It's right here. Beautiful, right? And again, you don't have to go into the game view. You can always click on the camera and see where it appears. Here with the GUI, one thing about the GUI that you have to be mindful of is that it is in screen space, and so this camera won't always grab it, and so you might want to see the GUI here. But if you want to, without minus the GUI, this is a perfect way to see how everything looks. And again, it updates live time, so it's pretty cool. So that is inside the game view, inside the game object, and you can create a camera, move to view and stuff. But all of this is fine, and that's the basic Unity you need to know to get around any project. And as long as you can do the Alt and you can double click, you can move around, and you can sometimes pan to, and you can fun stuff. But other than that, that is the basics to Unity. Before we're going to start getting to code and learning a little bit about code, and then going into creating a game or something that moves around the scene, right? So see you in part 4, where we start learning the basics of code in C#.